Breaking news, multiple people dead in a shooting at a Buffalo, New York supermarket. Authorities say the suspect is in police custody. Nick Smith is monitoring tonight's breaking developments and digging into new information about the shooter. A plane crash landing on a bridge in Miami. The crash putting several people in the hospital, at least one car bursting into flames. Smoke from the wreckage could be seen for miles. Our team in Miami will give us more updates. Unannounced visit. Today, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell and other GOP senators met with President Zelensky in Kyiv. Zelensky calling the gathering a strong signal of bipartisan support for Ukraine. Plus, Finland's president tells Vladimir Putin that his country will apply to join NATO, despite Russia's concerns. Correspondent Tom Dempsey is standing by with more details. Changing battle plans. Ukraine's military says Russian forces are withdrawing from Kharkiv. The country's second largest city is recovering from fierce battles. The areas Moscow's troops are focusing on right now. We have a crew on the ground in Ukraine.
Live from News Nation headquarters, this is News Nation Prime.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Rudabeh Shabazi, and we begin with breaking news out of Buffalo, New York. Police say multiple people are dead after a shooting at a supermarket. Authorities did arrest that shooter. News Nation correspondent Nick Smith joining us now in studio. And Nick, so many shocking details in this story. And tonight's story bringing a lot of heart-wrenching moments. Here's a man leading a prayer after today's press conference. Heartbreaking. We will have much more on this story, including interviews with community leaders here live in just a moment. But meantime, downtown Milwaukee is under a curfew after 3 shootings. At least 21 people shot last night there. In one of the shootings, 17 people were hurt when 2 groups started firing at each other. 3 people hurt in another shooting and 1 in a third. All of the gunfire ringing out blocks away from the Fiserv Forum, where the Milwaukee Bucks lost the Boston Celtics in Game 6 of the NBA's Eastern Conference semifinals. All of the victims are expected to survive. The Bucks canceled tomorrow's watch party outside the arena. The city's mayor implemented an 11 p.m. curfew until Monday. And more breaking news. 1 person now dead after a plane crash lands in a Miami bridge. The small aircraft went down this afternoon, hitting a car and bursting into flames. 5 others also hurt in this crash. Meantime, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell led a delegation of Republican senators in Kyiv, meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier today. Senators Susan Collins, John Cornyn, and John Barrasso joined McConnell on the trip. It was meant to show support for Ukraine amid the Russian invasion. News Nation's Tom Dempsey is live in Washington, D.C. now with the latest on this surprise trip. And on the ground in Ukraine, Russian forces are pulling back from Kharkiv. The Ukrainian military says after weeks of shelling Ukraine's second largest city, Russian troops are shifting their focus to the eastern part of the country. Reporter Kieran McKellen is in Lviv with more. Happening now, a manhunt underway in Texas for an inmate who escaped after stabbing a prison bus driver. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice offering a $22,000 reward for information on Gonzalo Lopez, who escaped from a prison transport earlier this week. Lopez is thought to be part of the Mexican mafia gang and is considered extremely dangerous. News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton is live in Texas with the latest on search efforts. So Brian, how does something like this happen? Hundreds, meantime, gathered for the funeral service of former correctional officer turned fugitive Vicky White. White captured national attention when she helped plot the escape of convicted felon Casey White in Alabama, leading authorities on an 11-day manhunt that ended in southern Indiana. White shot herself after the 2 were involved in a rollover crash while evading police. Casey White has been extradited back to an Alabama county jail where he awaits trial on capital murder charges. Demonstrations across the country in response to the leaked Supreme Court draft indicating that the highest court may overturn the landmark abortion case Roe v. Wade. Abortion rights advocates taking to the streets in Tampa and Cleveland today, with protesters carrying signs and chanting slogans like "Bans off our bodies." In West Virginia, dueling pro-life and pro-choice activists turned out debating if women should have access to abortion services. The Supreme Court is expected to make a final decision on Roe v. Wade next month. Deadly medical mistake. A former nurse admits to accidentally killing a patient, but she won't be going to prison. The surprising sentence a judge handed down. The former Tennessee nurse charged in the death of a patient she mistakenly killed by mixing up medication will not be going to prison. Redonda Vaught faced up to 6 years behind bars. Instead, a judge gave her 3 years of supervised probation. Vaught was convicted of negligent homicide and abuse. Investigative correspondent Rich McHugh has more on the sentencing. That was Rich McHugh reporting, and there is still a lot to unpack concerning a deadly mass shooting at a Buffalo supermarket. Police do have the shooter in custody. What else do we know about that violent rampage? Nick Smith is digging into the details. He'll join us after the break. Breaking news, Buffalo police investigating a mass shooting at a supermarket. The gunfire breaking out this afternoon. The shooter is in police custody. Nick Smith is following tonight's breaking developments. And Nick, so much to unpack here. All right, Nick, thank you. And here to talk about the impact of today's shooting on the community is Bishop Perry Davis. He is the founder of the Stop Violence Foundation in Buffalo. Thank you for being with us tonight. And I know you've done a lot of work to stop violence within your community, and to find out someone came from outside the community, traveled hours to target African-American people who are just going about their day at the grocery store. What is your reaction? And here are some of the other stories we're following tonight. Parents across the country anxious as baby formula keeps flying off store shelves. A new report shows 43% of the nation's baby formula supply is out of stock. That's according to Data Assembly, which tracks retail out of stock messages. The report also says more than half of all formula supply in 8 states, including Texas, Nevada, Tennessee, and Delaware. President Biden says finding a solution to the shortage is an urgent matter. Kansas is now the 35th state to legalize sports betting. Governor Laura Kelly signed a bill into law this week allowing people to use their phones or computers to wager on sports or place bets at state-owned casinos. Today marks 4 years since the Supreme Court ruling allowed for states to consider sports gambling. In that time, Americans have bet $125 billion on sports. California Governor Gavin Newsom's state budget plan includes a record $97.5 billion surplus. Newsom says the budget, totaling $300 billion, features major increases in spending on health care, education, childcare, and the environment. The budget would also leave the state with about $37 billion in reserves. A new survey says the steady increase in COVID cases is not worrying Americans. Research company Gallup says 31% of U.S. adults are very or somewhat worried about getting the virus. Mask wearing in public, too, is becoming less common. 50% of Americans say they've worn a mask outside their home in the last 7 days. But health experts in Northern California want to bring back the mask mandate. Here's News Nation's Dan Thorne. That was Dan Thorne reporting. And tonight, firefighters in Southern California are battling a massive wildfire. The fire broke out Wednesday in Orange County and destroyed or damaged more than 24 homes and injured 2 firefighters. The blaze, driven by California's drought and those windy conditions, has burned through nearly 200 acres and continues to threaten coastal Orange County homes. Hundreds of people south of Los Angeles were forced to evacuate. For one family, the tragedy hit especially close to home. Sasan Darian and his family had to flee their home in Laguna Niguel, which was destroyed by the fire. He is joining us live tonight. Thank you so much for being here with your cat. I'm glad you both are okay. We saw your video, and in Southern California, of course, you're no stranger to the wildfires every year. But what was it like to see it creep closer and closer to your family home?
Yes, well, in that particular area, we never considered that canyon to be any sort of threat to wildfire throughout since 1994 when we moved there. So it was just a surreal experience because of the speed, the exponential speed. As I posted in the videos when I was recording, we should have gotten out a few minutes earlier, because at the end, feeling the heat just rushing at us, getting in the car, my daughter feeling that there was embers of fire on us. We had to pat ourselves down. Fortunately, no injuries or deaths for anyone in the community and in the city, and firefighters, everyone included.
Yeah, and in a situation like this, you look for things to be grateful for, but your daughter actually had sparks on her, right?
Yes, she's not here right now, but she was with me. So she's 7 years old. She mentioned it to me. She said, "Dad, we're on fire." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then I started feeling myself, and we had sparks and we were rushing out. So I've seen the solar eclipse up north when it happened a few years back. It was, the sky had just turned completely red. The sun's sort of like a partial eclipse, and it was a surreal experience. Like I said, too close for comfort, especially at the end. We should have evacuated the 10 minutes earlier that they were mentioning on the helicopters. And fortunately, again, we're fortunate that no one got hurt.
Yeah, very fortunate. So is there anything left of the family home?
No, I mean, it's like, it reminded me of, it's like if you ever were on top of a ancient ruins, you see a bunch of columns still standing, but everything else demolished. And that's exactly what it was when I went back and visited. And I'm actually going to go back again today with my brother in just a short while. We have to park far away to be able to go because the street is still closed to cars. And well, fortunately, like I mentioned, we have insurance that's going to cover it. Lost some memories that can't be replaced, items like that. But like I said, things will be okay. We must, but this is a problem that's going to continue because of weather change, climate change, and everything.
Yeah, like I said, every year in Southern California, you all battle those fires with the Santa Ana winds. Were you able to take anything with you, or did you just have to flee right away?
If I really thought that's the exponential speed of the wind, the way the wind was so bad that day, extraordinary. I thought looking at the fire racing up the canyon that, probably 20, 30 minutes if it's really going to take the house. But it happened within a 5-minute period where we just had to go within that 5 minutes. I felt the heat rushing up on my body. And when I felt the heat of the fire, that's the point, get out. So I rushed out with my daughter, went and grabbed my dad in the backyard because, he's thinking if he has a hose, he can fire down some embers or something. It just rushed out as fast as we could. And I think 75% of the houses or 80% of the houses on that side facing the canyon were either destroyed or damaged.
And like you said, you have insurance, everyone's alive and okay. That's the important thing. But when you think of the things that you maybe miss the most, the things that are sentimental to you, that have, an emotional connection for you, what do you think of?
Today I just remembered my grandpa, before he passed away, he gave me a backgammon set, and that can't be replaced, and things like that. So unfortunately, memories, pictures, and all that we had backed up on the cloud and everything. But that backgammon set I'm gonna miss because that's very sentimental to me. And as time goes on, and I think about the yearbooks, of course, are gone and all that. But I think for me it was my grandpa's backgammon set he gave me because, nothing will replace that.
Yeah, I can relate to that, and probably so many memories you spent playing those games. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you and your family and your cat are okay. Sasan Darian, thank you.
Thank you.
A similar threat, COVID cases rising around the world, a country that's adding tougher restrictions now. And we have more developments tonight in the shooting at the Top grocery store in Buffalo, New York. Peyton Glendron, an 18-year-old of Conklin, New York, who drove hours to Buffalo to open fire on people going about their day shopping in the grocery store, is being arraigned right now. That is an extremely quick arraignment, just hours after he is accused of opening fire in the parking lot and in the grocery store. We will have much more on this. He killed 10 people today in Buffalo, New York. Meantime, let's get to some other stories we're following tonight. Cases of COVID-19 are rising in North Korea, the country confirming 21 new deaths and more than 174,000 people with fever-like symptoms today. North Korea has turned away vaccines from the international community, leaving its population unvaccinated. President Kim Jong-un addressed the virus in a meeting today, outlining the country's plan to stop the spread and pledging to donate some of his own private medicine supply to further the country's anti-virus campaign. Russian President Vladimir Putin is warning Finland not to seek NATO membership. The Kremlin releasing a statement today telling Finland that if the country joins NATO, relations with Russia would be negatively impacted. The neighboring countries have a history of being neutral, but Finland's president says Russia's invasion of Ukraine has changed Finland's security environment. Finland's president says Finland will apply for NATO membership in the coming days. Back here in the U.S., the Mountain West is expanding its flying options. This month, a brand new terminal opened in Utah at Provo City Airport. And this summer, travelers will have a new airline to add to the mix. Here now to talk about all of this is founder and Salt Lake City native David Neeleman, who also started JetBlue Airlines. Welcome to the show. It's nice to meet you. Your new airline launched this month. It's headquartered in Utah. Tell me about Breeze Airways and what makes it different. This is also a low-cost carrier, and the places you're going previously haven't had a hub there. They've had to be, people have had to go through connecting flights. So how did you decide on these ones?
Well, we announced Provo as our newest base. We're going to have 5 destinations out of there, and that was a couple weeks ago, but it's actually our 30th city. So we're flying 78 routes to 30 cities. We have service all over the nation, from White Plains, New York, to Hartford, Connecticut, to Tampa, Florida. So, what we decided is that, people were just tired of going through hubs. So all of our flights are nonstop. All of our flights bypass hubs. And in places like Huntsville, Alabama, you can fly to Las Vegas now. You could never fly there before unless you went through Dallas. So we want to get you there for about twice as fast for about half the price. That's kind of our goal.
As someone who has to take multiple flights to see my family in a small town in Oregon, I can totally relate to that. It's a welcome change. But this seems like a really challenging time to launch an airline.
It is, with COVID and now high fuel prices. But, there's a tremendous amount of pent-up demand. We're seeing record revenues every week, and, airfares are up because fuel prices are up. But, our costs overall are lower, so you'll always find a lower fare on us, and you'll always get there nonstop on routes. And you can just go to our website, FlyBreeze, and you can see all of the routes. It's a huge route system that we've built over the last 12 months.
And I wanted to ask you, I was reading about your salary of $200,000 with a $90,000 bonus in 2002, and you donated all of that to a catastrophe fund for employees who fell on hard times. You don't really hear about this often with CEOs of such successful companies, so let alone that humble salary. Why was it important to you to do that?
Well, that was when I was the CEO of JetBlue. I founded JetBlue, and I never took a dime of salary at JetBlue. And we had one of our crew members was being dropped off at the curb by her husband, and he passed away, and they didn't have burial expenses, and they were closing on a house. And, I just, helped her out and gave her the money to do all that. And then I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could put my salary out there and all of our crew members could match that, and we could raise $500,000 a year, and then our crew members could give the money to people who are in need, because we had a lot of people that had catastrophes. So it was called the JCCF, the JetBlue Crew Member Crisis Fund, and it's still going today. So it's a great legacy that I have at JetBlue.
It's pretty amazing. And this new tagline of your new airline is seriously nice. So an internal corporate culture makes a big difference, right? How does that translate to consumers?
Well, I think seriously nice is something we can deliver on. We can't control fuel prices. We can't control the weather. We can't control air traffic delays. We can't control mechanicals, but we can control being nice. And so no matter what happens, every day we have this mantra that we're seriously nice. And everyone that comes to work at the company, it's not just seriously nice to our guests that are on board our aircraft, but to each other. So it's just setting a bar and holding people accountable to that. And it's something we can deliver on.
All right, David Neeleman, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for having me on.
We want to go live now to New York. Governor Kathy Hochul giving a press conference on the shooting.
Targeting people who simply want to buy groceries.
So you've been listening to a press conference in New York after that shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo. The shooter has already been arraigned within hours of the shooting. He's also been remanded. He's charged with murder in the first degree. That is the highest level murder charge in New York State. It comes with a life in prison penalty. The governor and the prosecutors calling this domestic terrorism by a white supremacist, calling this a racially motivated hate crime. They talked about the role of social media, since he did live stream this shooting where 10 people died in a grocery store. They said that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. They talked about how it made them angry. Let's go now to Nick, who has much more. Texas authorities are offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of an inmate who stabbed a bus driver while escaping a prison transport. More than 300 officers are searching for Gonzalo Lopez. He's a man convicted on multiple charges, including murder. News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton is live in Texas with the latest on those search efforts. So, Brian, how does something like this happen? Meantime, today, hundreds gathered for the funeral services of former correctional officer turned fugitive Vicky White. White captured national attention when she helped plot the escape of convicted felon Casey White in Alabama, leading authorities on an 11-day manhunt that ended in southern Indiana. White then shot herself after the two were involved in a rollover crash while evading police. Casey White has been extradited back to an Alabama County jail where he awaits trial on capital murder charges. Coming up on News Nation Prime, we are still following the deadly mass shooting at the grocery store in New York. At least 10 people dead. We'll have another live report coming up. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell led a group of Republican senators in Kyiv, meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier today. The trip was meant as a show of support for Ukraine as it continues its fight against Russian invaders. News Nation's Tom Dempsey is live in Washington, D.C. with the very latest on this surprise trip. Tom, inside Ukraine, Russian forces are retreating from Kharkiv. The Ukrainian military saying after weeks of shelling the country's second largest city, Russian soldiers are focusing on the east. Reporter Kieran McQuillan is in Lviv with more. Kieran, thank you. And for reaction to these new developments in the war with Ukraine, both here and abroad, we're joined by Andriy Dobryansky, Communications Director for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Nice to see you. I first want to just get your reaction to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and other Republican leaders, their trip to Ukraine.
A great follow-up to the House Speaker and her trip. There were a few people who were commenting that that trip was a partisan trip. It's great to see that the sides have been equalized. A number of very solid Ukraine supporters alongside Senator Mitch McConnell, not least of which Senator Barrasso, one of the leaders of the Ukraine caucus. We saw Senator Corden there, Senator Susan Collins, all people with familiarity with Ukraine. Very productive trip as far as I'm hearing, especially when you have people familiar with Ukraine getting access back into Kyiv.
And we're seeing more and more people. We saw even Angelina Jolie last week, I think it was. I want to go to Finland now, and it looks like the country will be joining NATO despite threats from Putin. Could the country come under attack if it doesn't? And how do you see this playing out?
I would definitely expect that anything that happens in Finland would be some antagonistic efforts by Russia. We do know that there has been some electricity supply issues between Russia and Finland, whether that's gas supply, whether that's the fact that electricity is shared on some parts of the border. But let's not make light of this. This is the largest border with a NATO country that Russia will have. Russia already shares a fairly large border with Norway that people don't really think about. It was the only border that Russia shared with NATO up until up until other countries joining later on. It was Turkey and Norway that were the border countries with the Soviet Union.
And what about Sweden?
Sweden doesn't touch, so Finland curls around, and so Sweden doesn't necessarily touch the Russian border. However, the important thing is on the southern side. So now you will have all the Scandinavian countries in NATO, and that means the entire waterway of the Baltic Sea extending into the North Sea. Anything that Russia wants to do in terms of transversing that space, that's something it has to come into agreement with all NATO countries now.
Okay, and let's go back to the ground war in Ukraine and the war zone in the east. What has Russia accomplished or not accomplished there? And if the Russians can't take the east, what next? Where do they go?
Well, Russia is concentrating, I would say, more on the south. They're looking at the southern border, which is this border with the Black Sea. They want to extend their control of that entire border area. They've been trying to get out of Crimea and further west, very hampered by Ukraine's control of that area, the natural terrain, the many deltas that require you to cross bridges. And now, obviously, as we saw with the pontoon bridge situation in the east, that's something that just concentrates all their APCs onto one road, and it's just impossible for them to do a large assault of Odessa and go further all the way into Moldova, as some have speculated. So I will anticipate that there will be a lot of movement back and forth over the line. This is something that's been happening in Ukraine regularly over the last 8 years. But now with this open hot war, the thing that people need to realize when they hear these numbers of the authorization of a lot of military aid for Ukraine, this is a European land war. Think of this as any World War II movie you've seen, or the historic footage. You go into any European town and you see buildings with bullet holes. It is just a lot of ammunition being fired on both sides. That's why the costs are so high.
And let's talk about this aid package for Ukraine. We've been talking a lot about various aid packages going. There was a $40 billion package. It was blocked by Senator Rand Paul this week. Do you fear Americans are growing weary of funding the war? I mean, what happens if America starts scaling back support?
I don't think America is wary. I don't think the world is wary of supporting Ukraine. I think we saw earlier today that Ukraine won Eurovision by the largest public vote in history. So what is happening in the Senate is that the Senate would like to get this passed by unanimous consent so they don't have to go through a long process of going according to procedure as far as passing this. If they get unanimous consent, this bill can pass as quickly as it does in the House. What Senator Paul is doing is putting up a roadblock to it. This is what he does on numerous bills. But if you see only one senator out of 100 doing this, I don't think that signals anything as far as America's retreating from supporting Ukraine. America is fully behind Ukraine. We see that in numerous statements and by the White House, by congressmen, by senators.
All right, Andrei Dobryansky, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Still to come on Prime, fiery wreck. A small plane crashes on a busy bridge in Miami. The latest developments on the victims. And we're still following breaking news out of New York. Nearly a dozen dead after a man walks into a supermarket with a rifle and opens fire. What we know about a possible manifesto and when the alleged shooter is due back in court, who's already arraigned tonight. Here's a look at some headlines we're following. A plane crashed on a bridge near Miami today, striking an SUV before bursting into flames, leaving one person dead. 2 other people on board the plane were taken to a nearby trauma center, while 3 others involved in the crash were taken to a hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. The baby formula shortage in the U.S. has parents turning to milk banks for help, but it's not a permanent solution. Milk banks aren't suitable for all formula-fed babies, especially those with dietary restrictions. The formula shortage began in February with a safety recall crippling distributions, leaving many parents to turn to online retailers to buy formula. President Biden is urging manufacturers to increase production and restock shelves across the country. Elon Musk announced yesterday that his $44 billion bid to buy Twitter is currently on hold. The Tesla CEO said in a tweet that although the deal is on hold, he is still committing to buying Twitter. Musk says that if his purchase goes through, he will reverse Twitter's ban on former President Donald Trump. The billionaire also says that he supports the European Union's new law to protect social media users from harmful content. A federal judge has blocked an Alabama law that would make it a felony to prescribe gender-affirming puberty blockers and hormones to transgender minors. The judge issued a preliminary injunction to stop Alabama's ban on the drugs. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey said in a statement today that the ruling is, quote, a temporary legal roadblock. A spokesperson for the Alabama Attorney General says the state will appeal. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas says the Roe v. Wade draft opinion leak has changed the Supreme Court. He said at a press conference yesterday that the leak, quote, changes the institution fundamentally. Politico posted the copy of the 98-page draft opinion earlier this month. Chief Justice Roberts has called for a formal investigation into the leak. And demonstrators across the country taking to the streets in response to that leaked draft opinion. Abortion rights advocates going out in Tampa and Cleveland today with protesters carrying signs and chanting slogans like "Bands off our bodies." In West Virginia, dueling pro-life and pro-choice activists turned out debating if women should have access to abortion services. The Supreme Court is expected to make a final decision on Roe v. Wade next month. And we are following breaking news. Buffalo police investigating a mass shooting at a supermarket. The gunfire breaking out this afternoon. The shooter is in police custody. News Nation's Nick Smith is following tonight's development. So, Nick, how is the Buffalo community reacting to this tragedy?
They're visibly upset. So many people used this particular shopping market. And the mayor even earlier today at a press conference said that he was familiar with that market and that his family uses it.
All right, Nick, thank you. And we know that he almost took his life, but was talked out of it by officers on the scene. Thank you. Coming up next, historic high overdose deaths in the U.S. rise to record levels, the staggering data that was recorded. Plus, we're following developing news on that deadly mass shooting, the gunman opening fire inside the supermarket. We'll have live reports coming up. Prices at the pump are soaring again. The national average now at $4.45, according to GasBuddy.com. President Joe Biden has declared that fighting inflation is his top priority. It comes as the economy takes another blow. But as News Nation's Paul Gerke reports, these rising costs aren't just impacting what we pay at the store. It starts well before the products even hit the shelves. Paul Gerke reporting for us. A tragic milestone in the opioid crisis. The CDC confirming drug overdose deaths hit a record high in 2021. 107,000 Americans died from overdoses. That is an average of one death every 5 minutes. Drug overdoses are now the leading cause of injury-related death in the United States. Many health experts believe the COVID-19 pandemic worsened the crisis in many communities. Joining us now to discuss this urgent crisis is Dr. Yalda Safai. She is a psychiatrist based out of New York City. Thanks for being here. Drug overdose deaths hitting their highest level on record, 50% higher than the year before, 2/3 of those involving fentanyl or other synthetic opioids. What is going on?
Okay, so thank you for having me. The opioid epidemic really progressed in 3 phases. The first phase started in 1990s and involved mostly prescription opioids. In 2010, we had the second phase and we saw an increase in heroin use. It wasn't until 2013 that we really started to see an increase in overdose-related deaths due to fentanyl, which is about 50 times more potent than heroin. A growing share of the deaths we see today continue to come from overdoses involving fentanyl that is oftentimes mixed with other drugs such as methamphetamine. Now, fentanyl is a white powder. It can easily be combined with other drugs such as heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. It can even be stamped into counterfeit pills such for anti-anxiety medications such as Xanax. Now, because fentanyl is so much cheaper and easier to produce and distribute than heroin, it makes it more appealing to traffickers and dealers. But because it's so strong and potent, even a small amount can mean the difference between a user getting a normal fix and a fatal overdose.
And we're hearing about a lot of kids and college age people who are thinking they're doing other drugs, right? And then they're overdosing on fentanyl.
Correct. So nowadays, a lot of the drugs, such as cocaine and methamphetamine, are being cut with fentanyl because, like I mentioned before, it's pretty cheaper than heroin. So a lot of times you think you're doing methamphetamine or cocaine, but really you're doing methamphetamine that's laced with fentanyl. And for a fentanyl-naive person, even a small amount is enough to result in an overdose.
And is methamphetamine itself, is that making a comeback in this country?
It depends on the region. Mostly we're seeing an uptick of it on the West Coast and not so much the East Coast. But yes, we're seeing more and more use of it across the nation, but mostly in the West Coast.
Okay, and let's move to the pandemic. How has the pandemic contributed to the problem? What are your patients telling you?
Of course. Well, the opioid epidemic was a problem way before the pandemic started. Now, you add the virus and you have social isolation, you have economic pressure, which has been widespread since the beginning of the pandemic. These 2 reasons are enough to cause a relapse in drug use and could have contributed to the rising overdoses. Now, we had shutdowns in early 2020, which also caused some addiction treatment centers to close off temporarily, which meant that users didn't have a place to go to seek treatment or seek help when they needed to. However, all of this can't fully explain what we're seeing today. So the pandemic alone is not to blame for the uptick in overdoses.
And how do you balance, just as a mental health professional and an MD, how do you balance keeping safe from COVID and then also, keeping mentally healthy?
I think once the pandemic hit and we realized that social isolation is not a good fit for people who need social support, who need to see their sponsors, we started doing a really good job at implementing virtual check-ins and virtual treatment centers. However, we still need to meet in person to get our drugs if we're addicted. We need to meet in person to get our treatment for our treatment. So it wasn't an option to just virtually meet with our sponsors. We really had to go in person to pick up our medications. So it became a challenge for everybody. But I think the pandemic made us realize that we need to do better and we need to have better support in place. Even if a person can't physically be in a place, we should be able to reach out to them virtually.
And when we talk about substance abuse, it's really hard for the families too, the loved ones dealing with someone who's battling an addiction. What are your tips for them?
Of course. First of all, it's understanding, first and foremost, just telling the person in the family who's addicted to let them know that they're there in case they need them. Oftentimes, it takes multiple detoxes, multiple rehabs for a patient to be able to maintain sobriety. And once a person is addicted, it affects the entire family. So first step is for the family members to just let the person know who's addicted that they are there in case they need them to reach out to.
All right, Dr. Safai, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a really important issue. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
After the break, why this tiny Jack Russell Terrier is getting recognition from Ukraine's President Zelensky. And we are following breaking news on the deadly mass shooting in Buffalo, New York. This is a live look at the scene right now. People bringing flowers, teddy bears, starting a vigil there. A gunman opening fire outside a supermarket, killing at least 10 people. It was racially motivated, according to investigators. We will have another live report coming up. Apple had a busy start to the year with the announcement of the new Mac Studio, the Studio Display, and more. And there are still a lot more developments to come throughout the rest of the year. News Nation's Rich DeMuro takes us inside the studios at Apple Fitness. A four-legged fighter has become so essential in the fight to protect Ukraine that President Zelensky has taken notice. News Nation's Sloan Glass shows us the honor this pint-sized hero received. A racially motivated hate crime killing 10 people in New York. In our next hour, we'll break down the violent rampage and what investigators are uncovering. We have an update to the breaking news we've been covering tonight. The accused shooter who opened fire in a Buffalo, New York supermarket has already been arraigned tonight, charged with murder in the first degree. He is pleading not guilty to the charges and is being held without bail. News Nation's Nick Smith has been following this case for us closely all night. And Nick, the Department of Justice just releasing a new statement moments ago. Meantime, downtown Milwaukee is under a curfew after 3 shootings there. At least 21 people shot last night. In one of those shootings, 17 people were hurt when 2 groups started firing at each other. 3 were hurt in another shooting and 1 in the third. All of the gunfire ringing out blocks away from the Fiserv Forum where the Milwaukee Bucks lost to the Boston Celtics in Game 6 of the NBA's Eastern Conference semifinals. All of the victims are expected to survive. The Bucks canceled tomorrow's watch party outside the arena. The city's mayor implemented an 11 p.m. curfew through Monday. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell led a delegation of Republican senators in Kyiv, meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier today. Senator Susan Collins, John Cornyn, and John Barrasso joined McConnell. The trip was meant to show support for Ukraine amid the Russian invasion. News Nation's Tom Dempsey is live in Washington, D.C. with the latest on this surprise trip. Leaders of the groups of 7 countries are warning that the war in Ukraine is fueling a global food crisis. G7 diplomats say Russia is preventing grain cultivated in Ukraine from leaving the country. Ukrainian grain accounts for a large percentage of the world's supply. Germany's foreign minister says up to 50 million people in poor countries could go hungry with this shortage. Finland's president and prime minister calling for membership into NATO, quote, without delay. Neighboring Sweden is also expected to announce its decision on NATO membership in the coming days. In a phone call with the Finnish president, Russian President Vladimir Putin said joining NATO would be a mistake. Russia and Finland share a border that is more than 800 miles long. Israeli police say they are investigating the officers who beat mourners and pallbearers at the funeral for an American journalist killed in the West Bank. Al Jazeera reporter Shireen Abu Akleh was killed last week during a violent raid. It remains unclear who fired the deadly bullet. Video from yesterday's funeral service shows officers rushing the crowd and hitting people with batons. In the mayhem, the pallbearers briefly dropped the casket. The U.S. surpassing 1 million lives lost to COVID-19. America has been first in line for vaccines and treatments since the pandemic began 2 years ago. But now the White House COVID response coordinator warns the nation will be vulnerable without new funding from Congress. The debate heating up U.S. purchases of COVID-19 vaccine booster doses, including an upcoming new generation of vaccines that may better protect against the Omicron variant. News Nation's Nicole Burley spoke with Dr. Anthony Fauci about what to expect moving forward. Turning now to weather, and tonight thunderstorms from Kansas to Ohio could bring damaging hail and winds. Ellen Baca joins us now live from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So where are these storms right now, Ellen? Still ahead on News Nation Prime, over 40% of U.S. baby formula is out of stock, leaving parents desperate to feed their infants across the U.S. We'll speak with one mother trying to find a way around the shortage for her son. And later, police upping the ward for help tracking down an escaped inmate, now on the Texas 10 most wanted fugitives list. Nationwide baby formula shortage. Parents now trying to help each other get what they need to raise healthy babies as stores begin to ration formula. Big name retailers like CVS, Walgreens, and Target putting purchase limits on formula in an effort to keep the limited supply from disappearing too quickly. The shortage even has the attention of the White House, with President Biden speaking to manufacturers and retailers while also announcing new actions to address the shortage, like simplifying product offerings and expediting imports from abroad. While action is being taken at the federal level, correspondent Kelly Beeson looks into how parents are dealing with the issue. Parents across the U.S. who rely on formula to feed their babies are resorting to drastic measures to keep their families healthy. Mothers turning to Facebook or other social media to track down stores that still have a supply. Kaylee Rogers is one of them, and she is joining us here tonight. Thank you so much for being here with your beautiful baby. Happy little baby there. What is your day? What is your life like day to day? What are you doing to try to find formula?
It is so stressful. I'm posting on Facebook probably almost every day now at this point, posting in Facebook groups. I'm calling around stores. I'm, just Googling where I can find this formula, and it's hard.
It must be a scary feeling. I mean, it's already so stressful to become a mom, right? And be up all night, and you want your baby to be healthy and have all the best possible nutrition.
Yes, definitely.
Do you have enough for now to sustain?
Right now we are on we have 2 days worth. I should have some coming in next week. Fingers crossed. I ordered it off Facebook, so I'm hoping it does show up. But that's what we're waiting on. If not, we are going out tomorrow to look for formula.
So you have to make trips, like it's like a mission. You just go from store to store to try to find any kind of formula?
Yeah, he needs amino acid-based formula because he has a cow milk protein allergy and a soy allergy. So that really limits our options also when we're going to these stores, since it's a specialty formula.
I was going to ask about that. I mean, it's hard enough just for the average parent now to find the specialty formula. Do you find that it actually, maybe there's more of it, or because it is a specialty formula, or is it just as tough?
It's tough. Right now, all day long, I'm getting, notifications on Facebook where people are posting, who has Pure Amino or who has Neocate, which these are the amino acid ones. And once someone does post, we have some, it's bombarded comments. So if you do get a chance to actually comment, there's probably already 100 people ahead of you.
So do you find that moms are competing with each other, or that they're helping each other?
See, it's hard to say. I mean, we all are trying to help. And I think sometimes the way we're helping, when you're posting, this store I found has it, you're posting it to a group with, 500-600 plus people, thousands of people actually, and some of them. And so, immediately people are going to go snatch it right up.
And we found out that today that it could be 2023 until the full supply is brought back online. How does that make you feel? I mean, does this make you angry, aside from just the stress of trying to track it down?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, these are babies we're talking about. If we can't give them breast milk, which, some of us can't physically do that, formula is what we rely on. So this shouldn't be something we have a shortage of.
Yeah, it's a basic staple.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I wish you the best. Hopefully you're not on a mission too long tomorrow to go try to find formula for your baby. And we appreciate you being here. And it was nice to meet your little baby, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Updating breaking news out of Buffalo, New York, where a shooter is now in police custody facing murder charges. 18-year-old Peyton Gendron is accused of shooting 13 people at Tops Supermarket, killing 10 and injuring 3. The Department of Justice now stepping in to assist with the investigation. News Nation's Nick Smith has the statement from Attorney General Merrick Garland. Here's some other headlines we're watching today. A new report from the Department of the Interior outlines the United States' involvement with boarding schools for Indigenous children. According to the report, the government collaborated with Catholic and Protestant churches to Christianize Native children and separate them from their customs and their land. The Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative investigative report found that Indigenous children were sent to at least 408 boarding schools from 1819 to 1969. Today, hundreds gathered for the funeral services of former correctional officer turned fugitive Vicky White. White captured national attention when she helped plot the escape of convicted felon Casey White in Alabama, leading authorities on an 11-day manhunt that ended in southern Indiana. White shot herself after the two were involved in a rollover crash while running from police. Casey White has been extradited back to an Alabama County jail where he awaits trial on murder charges. 4 cadets at the Air Force Academy are in danger of not graduating because of their vaccination status. The 4 cadets may have to pay back thousands of dollars in tuition for refusing to get the COVID-19 vaccine. They're also in danger of not being commissioned as military officers when the ceremony takes place in a few weeks. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory last year for all service members and military academies. Dallas police believe a shooting at a Koreatown hair salon on Wednesday that left 3 women injured may have been a hate crime. Chief Eddie Garcia announced yesterday that the shooting could be connected to 2 other shootings at Asian American businesses. Authorities are still searching for the shooter who opened fire in the hair salon before driving away in a maroon minivan. The owner of Plains All-American Pipeline has agreed to pay $230 million for the 2015 oil spill in Southern California. The settlement includes a $184 million payout to fishermen and $46 million to property owners. The spill pumped thousands of barrels of crude oil into Southern California beaches, blackening the shore for miles and killing wildlife. It was the worst oil spill in the state since 1969. Right now, buying a home can seem impossible. Moody's Home Price Index says over the past 2 years, houses cost 32% more across the United States. The National Association of Realtors says it's even more at 39%. Moody's Analytics also says 96% of U.S. homes are overvalued. News Nation's Paul Gerke is looking at what's on the horizon for prospective buyers. Right, Paul Gerke, thank you. And now to weather and the heat not letting up in the Southwest from Southern California to Texas. Record high temperatures will be a challenge. Ellen Baca joins us now live from Grand Rapids, Michigan. How about these temperatures? All right, that's good news. Thank you. Still to come on News Nation Prime, the U.S. military beefing up Arctic operations. A retired general weighs in on the changes for troops and what they're learning from the Russia-Ukraine war. Before we go, a quick look at some of this week's top headlines you might have missed. U.S. producer prices have showed an 11% increase in April from a year earlier, a sign of high inflation remaining a burden for months to come. Food costs are up 1.5% from March to April, while warehousing prices are up 3.6%. A new consumer price report shows inflation levels are expected to remain stubbornly high throughout 2022. Music lovers are returning to concert halls at pre-pandemic levels. StubHub announcing a 25% increase in ticket sales compared to 2019. This comes as COVID cases steadily rise across the country. Many big-name acts like Justin Bieber and Kenny Chesney are restarting tours initially postponed by the pandemic. Forbes has released the 10 highest paid athletes of 2022. Footballer Lionel Messi tops the list with $130 million in gross earnings. He earned $75 million from his contract with Manchester United and $55 million from brand deals. LeBron James comes in at number 2 with $121.2 million. Other notables on the list include Cristiano Ronaldo, Steph Curry, and Tom Brady. A surprise payout for employees at the Cosmopolitan Hotel in Las Vegas. 5,000 employees were given a $5,000 bonus. Bonus comes as the resort prepares to come under new ownership. Parent company Blackstone announced it's selling the Cosmopolitan for almost $6 billion. Want to show some love to your four-legged friends, or maybe you have an exotic pet waiting to be introduced to the nation? Send us a picture or a short video of your pet doing something adorable or taking part in its usual shenanigans, and we'll feature them right here on the weekend edition of News Nation Prime. Just go to newsnationnow.com/petnation. And speaking of adorable pets, we have a little visitor in the studio today. This is Lila. We thought we'd start her out, this is my little doggy, Lila.
This is Lila, and I have to say, Lila and I met back in the makeup room when I first got here. Lila rushed right over to me, and you and I were joking about it, but it's one of those things where pets are just genuine love.
Getting an unflattering view of her right now. Sorry about that. They're just pure love. And she actually was introduced to me at a TV station because she was the pet of the week. She was from a shelter, Adopt Don't Shop, and I fell in love with her. I knew she was my little soulmate animal.
And
so the rest is history.
Lila loves people.
Yes, she loves people, as you can tell. Get off the desk, Lila.
That's okay. But we want people to send us their pictures of their adorable pets.
Yeah, send us your adorable pets. Maybe they're doing something funny, a fun video, a cute picture. And that does it for us. It's a good way to end the show.
Ooh, I know.